They were not meant to rule an empire, at least not in the eyes of the world in the late 13th century. Just another small Turkic tribe on the edge of the decaying Seljuk Sultanate, caught between Mongol raids and Byzantine decline. Their leader was the son of a frontier warlord, barely known beyond the hills of Anatolia. But history has a habit of favoring the unexpected. His name was Osman, and from his sword, a legend would rise. The Ottoman Empire, a colossal force that would shape continents, decide the fate of empires, and outlive its enemies for over 6 centuries. It began humbly, on horseback, and it ended with gunpowder and revolutions. But in between was a saga of conquests, betrayals, revolts, grandeur, reform, and ruin. It is a story written in blood and gold. Osman I, sometime around 1299, declared independence from the weakened Seljuk overlords. His warriors, the Ghazis, fighters for the faith, were hungry for spoils, and the Christian Byzantine frontier offered just that. Raiding turned into occupation. Towns were captured. Fortresses fell. By the time of his death, Osman had planted the seeds of a dynasty, and his name would echo in the term Ottoman. His son, Orhan, took the dream further. In 1326, the Ottomans captured Bursa, their first major city, turning it into a thriving capital. Coinage was minted, bureaucracy was born. The Ghazi band had become a budding state, and yet few in Europe noticed. By the mid-14th century, the Ottomans made their boldest move yet. They crossed into Europe. Gallipoli, taken after an earthquake damaged its defenses, was the gateway. The Balkans would never be the same. Orthodox Slavs, Albanians, Greeks, they were unprepared for the disciplined fury of the Ottoman march. But then came Murad I. He created what would become the empire's steel spine, the Janissaries. Taken as boys from Christian families through the Devshirme system, they were converted, trained, and molded into an elite corps, fanatically loyal, ruthlessly effective. These were not soldiers, they were a war machine. Murad fell at Kosovo in 1389, stabbed by a dying Serbian noble. Yet his death only fueled the fire. His son, Bayezid I, called the Thunderbolt, struck deep into Europe. He besieged Constantinople. Christian kings scrambled to respond. The Crusade of Nicopolis in 1396 aimed to stop him. It failed spectacularly. But history is never one-sided. In the east, a storm was rising. Timur, the Tamerlane, a warlord from Central Asia, collided with the Ottomans in 1402 at the Battle of Ankara. Bayezid was captured, humiliated, and later died in captivity. The empire fragmented. Sons fought sons. Anatolia splintered. This could have been the end. But one son, Mehmed I, survived the chaos and restored unity. His grandson would go. In 1453, Mehmed II, just 21 years old, stood before the ancient walls of Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire, once mighty, had been reduced to a shadow. But its capital had defied conquerors for 1,000 years. Not this time. Mehmed brought cannon, massive, terrifying siege engines. For weeks the city held. Then, on May 29, 1453, the walls were breached. The Ottomans poured in. Constantinople fell. The last emperor died sword in hand, and a new era began. Mehmed II made the city his new capital. Renamed Istanbul, it became a fusion of East and West. Churches became mosques, markets buzzed, artists, scholars, architects flooded in. The Ottomans weren't just conquerors now, they were emperors. From here, the empire exploded outward. In the west, they swallowed the Balkans. In the east, they rolled into Persia. To the south, they swept through the Arab world, Syria, Egypt, Arabia, unseating the Mamluks and taking Mecca and Medina under their protection. The caliphate title passed into Ottoman hands. But the true golden age would arrive with one man, Suleiman. Known in the west as the Magnificent and in the east as the Lawgiver. His rule, from 1520 to 1566, was the pinnacle. The empire stretched from Hungary to Yemen, Algiers to Baghdad. His navy dominated the Mediterranean. His court rivaled any in Europe in sophistication. His legal reforms unified and stabilized a diverse population. But even Suleiman was human. He executed his best friend, his most brilliant son, and died while on campaign in Hungary. Still, his empire stood tall. Yet golden ages fade. The seeds of decline were already planted. Power struggles, corruption, military stagnation. The Janissaries, once elite, grew arrogant and uncontrollable. Sultans grew weak, palace-bound, often manipulated by court factions and eunuchs. And while the Ottomans clung to tradition, Europe changed. Gunpowder weapons evolved, naval warfare modernized, scientific revolutions shook the West. But in Istanbul, time slowed, bureaucracy bloated, innovation stalled. Reforms came, but always too little, too late. In 1683, they reached the gates of Vienna, again, but this time they failed. A coalition of European powers drove them back. It was the beginning of the end. The 18th century brought defeats, rebellions, and humiliation. Provinces slipped away, some to rebellion, others to foreign empires. Russia rose as a threat in the north, Austria chipped away at the Balkans. The once feared Ottomans became the sick man of Europe. They tried to heal. Selim III introduced reforms. He paid for it with his life. Mahmud II dismantled the Janissaries in 1826 in a massacre. New armies, schools, and systems were built, but the empire was bleeding. The 19th century saw the rise of nationalism. The Balkans ignited. Greeks, Serbs, Bulgarians, Albanians, all yearned for freedom. The empire became a patchwork of rebellion. And then came the modernizers, the Tanzimat reforms, laws, railways, constitutions, a flicker of hope, but always too little. By the dawn of the 20th century, the empire was crumbling. Corruption rotted its core. European powers treated it like a buffet. In 1908, a group of reformist officers known as the Young Turks seized power. They promised revival, modernization, and unity, but they delivered division. Then came World War I. The Ottomans sided with Germany. The gamble failed. The British incited Arab revolts. Gallipoli turned into a graveyard. Armenian populations were massacred in what many call a genocide. Cities burned, borders shattered. In 1918, the empire lay in ruins, occupied, dismembered, finished. But in Anatolia, a spark remained. Mustafa Kemal, later called Ataturk, led a resistance. By 1923, he founded the Republic of Turkey. A new secular nation rose from the ashes of empire. The last sultan was exiled, the caliphate abolished. And just like that, 6 centuries ended. The Ottoman Empire, which had once terrified Europe, protected Mecca, ruled Jerusalem, and redefined Islamic leadership, was no more. But its legacy is inescapable. In cuisine and language, in mosques and palaces, in borders and memories, the Ottomans linger. They were brutal and brilliant, tolerant and tyrannical, backwards and ahead of their time. They remind us that empires rise, shine, and fall, not always because of weakness, but sometimes because the world simply changes faster than they can. And if you listen closely, in the alleys of Sarajevo, the domes of Istanbul, the ruins of once great cities, you can still hear the echo of a marching band, a call to prayer, the clash of swords, and the fading footsteps of sultans.